Election day may be 1 week away, but tonight, the kids are picking the president. Welcome to Nick News, Kids Pick the President. We've got host Keke Palmer breaking down the facts about U.S. presidential elections and talking to real kids about the issues they care about the most. We'll also hear about how important it is to vote, with a little help from our friends DJ Khaled, Liza Koshy, Steph Curry, Jace Norman, Sky Jackson, and many more. And don't miss the premiere of an all-new exclusive track from Nick's very own Young Dylan. It all starts right now.
Our economy is booming, wages are rising, poverty is plummeting.
Welcome to Donald Trump's world. Up is down, lies are the truth.
We are going to have a victory that's even greater than 2016.
Today, the World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic.
We have not seen job losses like this probably since the Great Depression.
As president, I will always stand with the heroes of law enforcement.
Does anyone believe there'll be less violence in America? Donald Trump is reelected?
We are involved in a non-violent revolution.
We're saying to people that the vote is precious.
I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
The people of this country want and demand law and order.
You can't fix the economy until you fix the COVID crisis.
How will the government help make the world a better place?
On November 3rd, you're watching and you see who won the election, and I think we're going to do well.
Show up and vote. You will determine the outcome of this election.
When you allow people to change the world.
Vote, vote, vote.
I'm Keke Palmer, and you're watching Nick News, Kids Pick the President. By now, you'll probably noticed that a lot of the adults around you keep talking about one thing, the 2020 presidential election. But it can get pretty confusing. From the debates you see on TV to the conversations you overhear on the playground. Well, these days, it's more like a Zoom, but you get it. It's a lot for me too. So we decided to break it all down and create a space where you could have a voice. I know a lot of you might not be able to vote right now, but that doesn't mean your voice doesn't count. In the next hour, we're going to explore the issues that matter the most to you. You'll hear about the history of voting, the new normal in the era of COVID-19, racial equality, the environment, and more. And we'll tell you everything you need to know about the sometimes complicated voting process. And since we also asked kids to pick a president, you'll find out who the winner is. So, let's get into it. I love voting. It's honestly one of my top 5 favorite things to do. And the best part is, I can do it from my own home. Unfortunately, it hasn't always been this easy. I promise I'll tell you all about it. But first,
what is voting anyway?
Voting is a part of a system called democracy, where people voice their opinions and it shapes the outcome of a decision. It's basically a fancy, official way to express yourself, to tell people what you want. And when a group of people vote between 2 or more different options, the option with the most votes wins.
Sometimes you get who you voted for, sometimes you don't.
Now, you can vote for something as simple as choosing between having Krabby Patties or spaghetti tacos for dinner, or for something a little bigger, like who could be class president, or who should receive the Kids' Choice Award for favorite female singer, actress, television host. Pretty cool, right? Well, nothing is cooler or more powerful than voting in a U.S. election, because that's when we get to decide who our leaders will be. And no, I'm not talking about your parents. Oh, and something else. During elections, we also get to vote on some of the actual rules themselves. Seriously, they have fancy names like propositions or ballot measures. There are different types of U.S. elections, but the biggest one, and the one we're here to talk about today, happens every 4 years. That's the general presidential election, where Americans get to choose the next president and vice president. Well, sort of. Us, plus a special group of people called the Electoral College, get to pick the president. But that's a whole different topic that we'll get into later. So now that we know what voting is, who's actually allowed to do it? All U.S. citizens 18 years or older who are registered to vote. But that wasn't always the case. For a really long time, many groups were excluded from voting, right here in the United States. Back in 1789, when the U.S. was still in its early days, the Founding Fathers wrote a fancy, super important document called the Constitution. The Constitution lists every American's rights. Now, today, the Constitution gives Americans the right to vote free from discrimination. But in 1789, that decision was left to the states. And back then, the states decided only white men 21 years or older who owned property could vote. Eventually, all white men who were old enough could vote. But it wasn't until nearly 100 years later, in 1870, after the end of slavery, that all men born in the U.S., despite the color of their skin, could participate in elections. So basically everyone except women and Native Americans could vote. That left out more than half of the population. It meant that your mom, your grandma, auntie, and even I wouldn't have been able to vote. Well, those conditions didn't last very long either. See, the very little progress that was made quickly disappeared. Around the 1880s, black men in the South were once again denied the right to participate in elections, thanks to a set of racist, unfair rules called Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws claimed to create separate but equal rules that were definitely not equal for black and white Americans. But what they really did was deny black people rights and freedoms simply because they were black. And when it came to voting, that's exactly what happened. Black Americans who wanted to vote had to first overcome unfair obstacles like paying poll taxes, passing reading and writing tests, and even guessing the number of jelly beans in a jar. And because of centuries of slavery and racial discrimination, all of this led to tons of voting barriers for black Americans. See, black people in the U.S., especially those in the South, weren't fully freed from slavery until 1865. And when they finally were freed, they were basically left with nothing. They had no property, barely made any money, and most had never been taught to read or write. This meant Jim Crow laws made it nearly impossible for millions of black people, millions of Americans, to vote. But some progress was made in other areas. In 1920, white women were finally allowed to vote. Decades later, Native Americans, you know, the people who were literally here first, began to receive the right to vote, state by state. Fast forward to 1965, past decades of oppression, unjust laws, and the blood, sweat, and tears of many black Americans, including civil rights activists Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and John Lewis. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and gave not just black Americans, but all non-white, English-speaking U.S. citizens the right to vote. Think about that. 1965. That really wasn't that long ago. Most of our grandparents were born before then. Most forms of voter suppression have become illegal, but there are still some laws that continue to make voting difficult for Americans who are black, brown, and lower income. Like in 2013, when portions of the Voting Rights Act were struck down and made it harder for some people to participate in elections. They did things like cut down on the number of places people could go to vote, or required voters to show ID cards at the polls. These changes have since been sent back to Congress to repass, but nothing's happened yet. Now you might be thinking, but I'm not even old enough to vote yet. How does any of this affect me? Well, do you go to school? Parks? The public library? All of those places are controlled by the government, by the people who adults vote for in elections. Which means that even though you can't vote yet, the things being voted on still have a direct impact on your life. So don't wait until you're 18 to get involved. Get out there now. Inform yourself, express your opinions, and let your voice be heard.
Bless up, this is DJ Khaled, and I want to send my love to the young world out there. Vote. DJ Khaled and the Khaled family want the whole world to vote. Young world, let's go.
You guys have to vote. If you are watching this, go vote. If you are not old enough to vote just yet, make sure your parents go vote.
And when they say, of course we are, we love choosing our future, then you say, okay, how do I do that when it's my time to vote?
Every vote counts, so get out there and make your voice heard.
COVID-19 is a massive issue this election, with both President Donald Trump and Vice President Joe Biden. It was a big part of the first presidential debate, and many parents quickly realized they had a lot of explaining to do to their kids.
Here's the deal. Sanders. Everything he's saying so far is simply a lie.
Joe, you're the liar. I graduated last in your class.
Folks, do you have any idea what this clown's doing? Will you shut up, man?
Listen.
It's hard to get any word in with this clown. You're the worst president America has ever had.
Are you guys excited? Yes. I said, are you guys excited? Yes. Emma, how would you describe how each candidate acted during the debate?
They acted like children, like literal children that were doing a class debate, but it's really just bickering over each other and not letting each other speak.
Oh, that's such a good point. Miguel, how would you describe how each candidate acted during the debate?
Like Emma, I'm also gonna say they acted like children, because just like a 5-year-old, like a 3-year-old, they were just shouting at each other. They wouldn't let each other talk. Like, it's like, the spotlight's mine. No, it's mine. Mine, mine.
Honestly, the debate feels like a reality show. It honestly made me feel like I could be the president because I could state my points. Yeah, because
you can be the president, though. You can be the president.
Yeah, because I could state my points more clearly and more maturely than the presidential candidates did.
I know 6-year-olds that are more mature than that.
Yeah, they were interrupting each other and making rude comments, which is not mature at all.
It was chaos.
And Zoom calls can be quite chaotic, but even you guys aren't even stepping over each other in a Zoom call. I'm gonna ask you, Zoriel, what would happen if you ever spoke to your parents in the way that the candidates just spoke to each other?
Well, fortunately, I will never find out because my parents have always taught me to be respectful and responsible for my own actions. And I have 2 younger sisters, so I have to set a good example. And if I do something good, they'll do something good. But if I do something bad, they'll do something bad. And that won't be good at all.
I love that you know that and that it's important to you to be an example, which leads me to a question that I want to kind of give to all of you guys. I guess we can start with Delaney. What qualities do you look for in a leader?
I definitely look for honesty, someone who's honest about the issues that are affecting us at this time. Someone who's kind, who cares about our country, and someone who cares about the issues that I care about, such as like global warming, equal rights, and finding a cure for COVID.
I would look in a leader for being, brave, and I think they were both being super disrespectful to each other, and I think it's a little bit disappointing to me because one of those people are gonna be our president for the next 4 years. They weren't really showing responsibility for being president in the debate.
Yeah, after watching that, it's kind of scary to know that one of those 2 men are gonna lead you.
This is the hard part, guys, when you do get of age, is accepting that you're not gonna love everything one person says. There's always gonna be some things you agree with and some things you don't. The hard part is making the choice of what you can live with and what you can't. I want to bring in a child, adolescent, and family psychologist, Dr. Jennifer Hartstein. Dr. Jen, when you hear Ian use the words rude, disrespectful, mean, what does that tell you?
It tells us that the kids are listening, right? I mean, we instill in these great kids. I've been listening to this conversation and everybody's giving so much great feedback and input, and we're teaching them to be respectful. And then we have leaders who are not as respectful and who are not showing those same qualities we want to kind of embolden in the children in our lives. So we need to start to think about what messages do we need to counteract as adults in the lives of these kids, because some of the leadership qualities that they're observing aren't really what we want them to grow into.
How can parents, you think, objectively discuss the leadership in our country?
We kind of had this master class for a lot of the adults of what not to do, right? Of how to build towards, how do we have healthy conversations without being disrespectful and stepping on one another's toes? Or how do we engage with one another in a healthy dialogue instead of kind of bullying and anger?
So our goal is to create a safe space to hear from some kids, to find out what's been on their minds and how they're dealing with the new normal. What word would you use to describe the new normal of virtual learning, wearing masks, social distancing, just the world today? So I'm gonna go around the room. I'm gonna ask Emma first.
So I think a word to describe everything that's going on right now is disconnected.
because everything like social distancing and wearing a mask and having to use technology instead of actually meeting up with people feels very disconnected because you're not able to do things the way that we were doing before.
Thank you so much, Emma. I totally agree with you. I feel the same kind of way. It's been very hard trying to be safe, but not being able to see the people I love. It definitely is disconnecting. What about you, Ian?
Well, my word would probably be abnormal because I'm always used to seeing my friends' faces. And also, I'm moving into middle school, so it's kind of weird seeing new people and not being able to see their whole face.
It's crazy. What about you, Miguel?
My word is necessary because in this new normal, the only way to stay from getting sick is to wear a face mask, stay distance learning if anyone in your family has special things. So yeah, my word's necessary.
I love that. It's totally a different perspective. Kind of made me feel a little bit positive when you put it like that, because it's like, yeah, it's a new normal and it's uncomfortable, but guess what? It's necessary, so I'm gonna get through it. I love that attitude. And you, Zoriel?
My word would have to be hullabaloo because we're all in a confusion. You know, like you said, it is a new normal, so we're not all the same.
Now say that word again.
Hullabaloo.
Hullabaloo. Woo, yeah, it's definitely hullabaloo, Zoriel. How would you explain the new normal, Rory?
I think I would use the word unique because 2020 is a very unique and different year, and I think that I and many other people will probably never forget it.
Yes, I love it, I love it. And where's Delaney?
I would probably say my word would be weird because it's definitely weird not being able to be close to people and having to wear masks whenever you go out.
You said it, girl. Well, I want to thank so much Dr. Jen Hartstein for being here. Emma, Ian, Zoriel, Miguel, Delaney, and Rory. I appreciate you guys. You are the future.
You may think the presidential election is decided by who receives the most votes, but ultimately, it's decided by the Electoral College.
What is the Electoral College?
The Electoral College is a group of people made up of voters, known as electors, that represent each state. Every state is given a number of electors that is equal to the 2 senators it has in the U.S. Senate, plus the number of members it has in the House of Representatives. Because the number of representatives it has is determined by a special population-based formula, states with larger populations means more electoral votes. California, for example, has a population of 39.5 million and has 55 electoral votes, while Connecticut, with a population of 3.5 million, has 7 electoral votes.
How does the Electoral College work?
There are 538 electors in total, and they each cast their own ballots for the president. In order for a candidate to win, they must receive at least 270 electoral votes. So even if a presidential candidate wins the popular vote, but doesn't get at least 270 electoral votes, the other candidate will be declared the winner.
Wait, what? Where did the Electoral College come from?
When the framers of the Constitution were deciding how the president and vice president should be elected, they worried about a lot of things, like whether the northern states would outvote the southern states because of the North's larger voter population, or whether everyday people would get too much power and Congress should choose the president. So to help address these concerns, the framers decided to create a system where each state would receive a specific number of electors who would pick the winner. But the southern and northern states couldn't agree on how many electors each state should have, mainly because, at the time, 40% of the population in the South were enslaved black people who couldn't vote. So after a long back and forth, for this and other reasons, the Constitution writers decided to make a key compromise, where even though enslaved people were not allowed to vote, they would be counted individually as 3/5 of a person. Eventually, the 3/5 clause was repealed, but the Electoral College is still used in U.S. presidential elections today.
You might not be old enough to vote, and if you're not, you got a mama, you got a daddy, you got an uncle, you got a cousin. Tell them to vote.
Punch in things that you may be concerned about and read. And then ask your parents, hey, are you going to vote?
To have our voice heard, we must vote. In order to do that, you have to encourage your parents, your family.
Go out and vote. Stay educated, stay informed, and big year, let's go.
What are you going to do for climate change?
My grocery store is still using plastic bags.
Why isn't it illegal to pollute the earth?
I would end global warming. It's affecting our planet's well-being, and the planet's well-being affects us.
I would make all gas-powered vehicles electric.
I live in Florida, and we get a lot of hurricanes. Is this because of climate change?
The air we breathe, the water we drink, and the planet we live on are front and center on the minds of our young population. So far this year, there have been 25 named hurricanes. Over 4 million acres of land have burned in California wildfires. And Flint, Michigan's drinking water is still one of the most closely watched in the country. It's clear. Kids want answers from our leaders about the environment. But since time is running out, they're taking matters into their own hands. I want to introduce you to 4 activists who are making a lot of noise and progress when it comes to the environment. Our first guest became known as Little Miss Flint after she wrote a letter to the then President, Barack Obama, drawing attention to the lack of clean water in her hometown. Thanks for joining me, Mari Kopanen. What is the latest on the Flint water crisis?
So the latest would have to be the water is still not fixed here. Like, it's still contaminated, it still has lead.
Now, you started out by giving out water bottles, but then I guess you realized that it could be kind of more harmful. So how have you shifted your focus?
So I have given out over 1 million bottles of water, but some of the people inside my hometown weren't taking responsibility over the water bottles. So then I stopped doing bottled water. Now I have my very own water filter that will be shipped out all over the country.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. What are some other places other than Flint that this is going to be going to?
There's bad water everywhere, just people don't recognize it because they think that since they're a different state, they don't have bad water.
It would be better if there was actual access everywhere to just good water that you didn't have to question. I want to bring in climate activist Supriya Patel, who says she felt the true impacts of climate change when the Camp Fire broke out in California just 2 hours from where she lives. Out of all of these issues that are affecting your generation right now, why did you decide to tackle the climate crisis?
I decided to tackle the climate crisis because it's impacting me here at home in California, and because as a young person, the climate crisis represents one of the greatest existential threats to my entire generation.
So Priya, you were able to get your local municipality to declare a climate emergency and work towards carbon neutrality by 2030. I mean, that's first of all incredible. And secondly, what was it like to see your hard work pay off in that way?
It was insane. We've had 2 successful climate emergency declaration campaigns here in Sacramento with our municipality and our city, and we're currently working to encourage Sacramento County, where I live, to declare a similar emergency. But it's just really amazing to see all of our hard work pay off, and it's a reminder of how far we still have to go.
I appreciate you for doing the work, because that's why voting and why using our voice isn't just awesome, but it's also a responsibility. We have to do the work to know how to activate it in the right way. And I love that. I love how you were able to pull that off. Congrats. Our next 2 guests are a little older, but not by much. I'd like to bring in 17-year-old Ananya Singh, who continues to lobby politicians to support a fossil fuel moratorium. Also, Jerome Foster II, who fought and won to have his hometown of Washington, D.C. pass the Clean Energy D.C. Act. Welcome, Jerome. Welcome, Ananya. When we think about activism, we think about protests and marching in the street, but what's another way that you can make an impact and get your word out?
I think it's amazing to get on the streets, but then we also need to be following up with demands to our legislators. Once you get your foot in the door and you start writing to your legislators and giving them phone calls, you can see that your voice really is important to be listened to. We totally have that right to make demands and to follow up on them.
As an environmental activist, a lot of my work from middle school to early high school has been like talking to people about the science and getting people to understand that 97% of scientists all around the world agree that climate change is here and that it's man-made.
I want to play you a portion of the vice presidential debate. Vice President Pence was asked if man-made climate change made wildfires bigger and hotter and hurricanes more deadly. Let's listen to his answer.
With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to hurricanes, The National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually, as difficult as they are,
thank you, Vice President,
there are no more hurricanes today than there were 100 years ago.
Now, Jerome, if you were speaking to young people at a climate change rally, what would you tell them about the Vice President's statement?
That is a complete lie, honestly, because people's lives are being uprooted by wildfires, and we are seeing a lot more hurricanes than before. When we look at American politics, it's about trying to preserve a narrative of normalcy and not really tackle and make bold solutions to protect our future.
I completely agree, and those are the kinds of things we need to be talking about internationally, not arguing back and forth about what's real and what's not.
It's a blatant disregard for the science. And the amount of lives that are lost every year just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. We can't have leaders like that who are just discounting millions of lives.
How would you like to see government officials tackle the climate crisis?
Yeah, I would love to see them do things like declare climate emergencies, just like Supriya said in Sacramento. Also feel the same urgency that I feel and other young activists feel, because we feel like, you know, it's really our lives are on the line.
We're going to be the people that are living on this planet for the next 50 to 60 years, and we want to have that fresh air. We want to be able to see snow. We want to be able to see those things that we love, that our parents got to enjoy, that we want to enjoy as well.
In our minds, it feels so simple, right? We just want them to get on the same page with us. What do you want to see in the new leaders of tomorrow, in such positions as the president?
I just want to see action. I want to see stuff get to and done.
Fair enough. Supriya?
I would love to see action on the climate crisis from our leaders, and I would love to see them put people above profit. Their pocketbooks are not more important than my future, and the fossil fuel industry is not more important than my entire generation.
Ooh, that's a word. What about you, Ananya?
Act with a lot of urgency around the climate crisis, and also really making sure that we're having just solutions to these problems.
With COVID-19, we have seen the federal government mobilize like we haven't seen before. As climate activists, we had a National Climate Lobby Day in 2019. We went into over 300 elected officials' office and said, hey, can you protect our future to establish new legislation? And they said, well, government can't really work that fast. Well, now you have a proven track record. Look at the roadmap for COVID-19 and figure out how we can do that proactively for the climate crisis.
Mari, I'm coming back to you. What can you say to kids who are afraid to speak up or feel like they're too young to get started?
If I started at 8, then you can start super soon. Like, it's not that hard. You just gotta get a voice and not be scared and just use your voice and speak up about opinions that matter.
This was incredible. This was just so awesome. I really want to thank you guys. Thank all of you, Mari, Supriya, Ananya, and Jerome. We appreciate you for being here and speaking with us today.
There's been a lot of confusion on how to vote.
What are all the ways to vote?
Voting in person is the most traditional way of voting. On the first Tuesday after November 1st, people go to the polls to vote. Polls are registered voting sites, like libraries, churches, or middle schools. You wait in line until it's your turn, then they check to see if you're registered, and that's it. You go into a booth and cast your vote. But this year, because of the coronavirus, people will be maintaining social distancing, wearing masks, and taking other precautions. Early voting is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. That whole process we just talked about, you do the exact same thing, just before the official election day. Voting by mail is basically like voting from your house and then dropping the ballot off in the mail. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, voting by mail is even easier this year. In most states, all you have to do is request a mail-in ballot. Others automatically send them. But the good thing is, there's no line in your house. In some states, you can also drop your ballot off at an authorized drop box, which can be a sure way of getting it delivered. But not all states have them, and not all states that do make them easily accessible. Of course, you can always just put your ballot back in the mail. What's the difference between absentee voting and voting by mail? Not much, really. Absentee voting is used by people who can't make it to the polls in their state on election day. That's it. Those are all the ways to vote. It doesn't matter how you vote. What matters is that you do.
Hey guys, I'm Miranda Cosgrove, and this is my buddy Maud. And we're just here to remind you to tell your parents to vote.
Whoever can vote
make sure that they do. Now more than ever, it is essential that we all come together and recognize that every single person's voice and vote matters.
Encouraging each one of you to stay engaged, keep thinking about what it's going to take to change our world for the better and how you can get involved.
Use your voice no matter how old you are.
In the midst of a health pandemic, another important issue affecting so many in this country came to the surface: racial equality. Following the killings of unarmed Black people, scores of folks took to the streets saying enough is enough. The impact of the coronavirus was also felt along racial lines as a result of legacies of inequality. A lot of you had questions for the candidates about what their plans are about racial equality.
How will you respond to the Black Lives Matter movement and help solve racism towards African Americans and other races?
What are you going to do for your presidency to help us Black people, since we've been suffering a little bit since 2020 began?
How are you going to have everyone get treated equally?
How would you tackle the issue of police brutality and racism in America if you were re-elected and got your second term?
We'd like to introduce you to a group of young activists who believe that learning about this country's past can inform our choices for the future. Now, Nolan, wow, you're just 8 years old and you organized your own BLM protest?
Me and my family went to a Black Lives Matter march, and I spoke into a microphone and I said, "Stop hurting Black people." And I wanted to have my own march because I wanted to hear other kids share their feelings.
Do you remember how many people attended?
Well, I thought there was going to be 15 or 10, but there was more than 700 people.
Oh my gosh. And Kristen, Mom, you're here. You helped Nolan organize the march. You know, why was it important for you?
Well, as a white mom to a biracial child, I know that his reality moving forward in this world is going to be very different from the one that myself and my husband experienced as youth. And so we know that we need to prepare them for what's to come. Something that he says too is that when adults see kids doing it, then hopefully they realize that they can make a change too.
How did you jump into that conversation of even explaining something like that?
You know, it started with a lot of reading and learning and talking to a lot of people of color and trusting their lived experiences, because I don't have those experiences. And so I knew that I needed to listen first and foremost, and then take what they told to me and what I read and give it to my son and my daughter as well.
How did you feel, Nolan, when your mom kind of started speaking to you about, you know, race or color or how people may feel about something like that?
Even though that we're skin is different color, we should be treated the same.
I feel the same way, Nolan, and it's clear that's what you feel at home, and I just love that. You know, it's important, and we're glad that you have a mom and dad like you have, so more Nolans and people with your mind are out there in this world. When you think about the president, what kind of personality do you want him to have?
I want a different president that supports Black Lives Matter.
17-year-old Zoe lives in Kentucky and started her organization, DICE, a month before the COVID pandemic put us all in lockdown. Zoe put together a school curriculum on diversity, equality, and anti-racism. And even during this time of social distancing, her message has taken off. Welcome, Zoe. What does DICE stand for, and what prompted you to start it?
In the time that I've lived in Kentucky, I have been in gifted education. As anybody who knows anything about gifted education, you'll know that there are not a lot of Black children in a lot of gifted programs. Issue got exacerbated in high school when the program continued, and there were, some students who were using the N-word just, kind of recreationally, and I, found myself just incredibly frustrated. Right before quarantine, I started Googling because I was like, surely there is some kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion training for young people, and I couldn't find one, so I partnered with some people at the University of Kentucky and at Civics Unplugged. We created DICE, D-I-C-C-E, which stands for Diversity, Inclusion, Cultural Competency, and Equity. And our goal is just to make that kind of programming accessible to young people and something that young people can bring into their own communities and give you all the training that you need to bring that into your spaces.
Okay, I have to talk to our next young activist, Ryan. Ryan, you are 18, and this will be your first time voting for POTUS. How excited are you?
It's always been a dream of mine to be able to step into, you know, a voting space and, you know, punch in my ballot for who I want to see represent me as a young Black person. I can't help but think about my ancestors who were, you know, shot with hoses and set dogs upon them just to fight for their ability to exercise a right that not many in the entire world get to exercise. So I really carry, you know, their work on my back, and I will use every power given to me to be able to vote.
Now in June, you organized a large protest in Missouri that made headlines. What motivated you to organize the protest? I live in a predominantly white suburb, and what I kind of noticed was a lot of the, you know, stereotypes and stipulations that came with protesting, especially in white suburbs, where kind of, you know, they thought we were just going to riot and loot. 94% of protests are peaceful, and that these peaceful protests are here to bring awareness and to bring about racial equity for Black lives to matter. All right, now I want to talk to Noor. Noor, you are doing impressive work in my home state of Illinois as well. Noor, you started a local BLM chapter in your hometown. Why was it important for you to do that?
To me, it was a way to get my community to A, wake up, and B, get involved.
What was the response in the community?
It was an overwhelming amount of support or kind of lack of consideration. So it was two very different ends of the spectrum. I think I've learned, like, it's not necessarily any singular person's job to educate people and to change their perspectives. It takes a community to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Thanks to all of you for your work and impacting change. Even for those not able to vote, there are so many ways to be active and engaged around racial equality and more. Coming up, we told you this was all about what matters to you. Don't go anywhere.
Election Day has always been the first Tuesday after November 1st. But have you ever wondered why?
Why do people vote on Tuesdays?
Congress first made it a federal law in 1845. Before then, states were allowed to hold their elections any day in November or early December. But that created an unfair system where states voting later in the month could be influenced by states that voted earlier. The country needed to find one day where all voters could cast their ballots at the same time.
Okay, but why Tuesday?
Tuesday turned out to be the easiest day for farm workers to vote. And they were the majority of voters at the time. A lot of voters lived far from their polling locations and needed at least a day to travel. Mondays didn't work because many people went to church on Sundays. And Wednesdays or Thursdays weren't great either, because that's when many farmers sold their goods at local markets. Tuesday, it seemed, could work for everyone. But today, some even want Election Day to be a national holiday so they don't have to go to work and can instead go vote.
We want to make sure you all use your voice. That's right. And tell your parents to vote.
I really think that there is so much hope for us, and I think we can really determine the future and make our voices heard.
I really want you guys to go out to those polls, vote early, do what you have to do, spread the word, and let's change the future together.
Vote, vote, vote. Love y'all.
There's a bunch of firsts we all get to look forward to as we get older. Like your first day of school, or your first roller coaster ride, or even the first time you drive a car. But there's one other first that sticks out in my mind, and that's my first time voting. Right now, young people across the country have cast or will cast their ballot for the first time. That's exactly what we did in 2008, when the youth showed up and showed out to elect the country's first Black president, Barack Obama.
Thank you. God bless you.
Not only is that exciting, but it's super important, because us young people have the power to change this country. We spoke to first-time voters all across the country and asked them why they're voting and how they're doing it.
Hey guys, Jace here, and this year I'll be voting for the first time ever.
Hi, I'm Monica Ramirez. I'm 18 years old and I'm a first-time voter.
I'm a Jamaican-American youth advocate from the Bronx, and I'm a first-time voter.
First-time voter.
I'm a first-time voter. I'm super excited to be voting in this year's election.
Because this is the first adult thing that I get to do.
The whole thought of going through the process of registering to vote seemed daunting at first.
It's a really big, important election.
But it was super quick and easy once I had done it.
I think whenever I first turned 18, being able to vote was like the first thing that automatically came to my mind.
This privilege to vote is certainly important to me.
My ancestors fought to secure the right for me to do so.
A healthy democracy can't function without the input from every citizen.
I feel an obligation to vote for those that aren't given the same privilege and opportunity.
Voting is a power that everybody can flex.
As young people, this is our best avenue to changing the issues that are important to us.
The issue that impacted me the most this year was definitely
COVID-19,
climate change, immigration,
women's reproductive rights,
gun legislation,
racial injustice,
police brutality,
Black Lives Matter movement.
especially because I'm Black and a woman.
We cannot be equal in this country until we all receive the same treatment. And that's really important to me, especially as an immigrant.
It's important that you don't just vote on a national level, but you also vote within your own communities.
The presidency isn't the only office that matters. There are lots of state and local offices that will impact your day-to-day life more than the occupant of the White House.
For my voting plan, I'll be voting on election day.
I'm voting in person on election day so that I can get my little I voted sticker.
I will do the early voting. I will be writing my ballot by hand and turning it directly in. So I'm voting by mail, and I'm completely confident that my vote will be counted.
And if you can't vote, that's okay.
Even though you cannot physically cast a ballot, your voice can truly inspire another person to get out there and make a difference in the local community.
Find people in your community that are working for the issues that you care about and find out how you can help.
You can talk to the people around you, talk to people who can vote, and make sure they vote on November 3rd.
The youth have been crucial, have been an integral part in ensuring that we see true legislative change in the country.
America is counting on us to fight for a strengthened democracy, and it starts with voting.
Yes, let's give it up to all the first-time voters. Woo! Y'all rock. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. We asked, you picked. It's time to reveal your choice for the next president and vice president of the United States. Can I get a drum roll, please? And the winner is...
Before we reveal the results, we need to let you in on some news. We know you depend on Nick for fairness and honesty, so we wanted to be honest with you. As we conducted our vote, our tech wizards at Nick discovered some cheating and were able to eliminate the unfair votes from our count. After lots of vetting, we feel super confident in our results. Take it away, Keke.
And the winner is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. There you have it. The kids, the future, have spoken. That's our show, you guys. And I gotta say, hosting this special is for sure going in my top 5. I had fun and I learned a lot, but it doesn't need to end here. If you're interested in learning more about our political process and how you can make a difference and maybe even become the next president, visit kidspickthepresident.com. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Keke Palmer, and before we go, I want to leave you with a Poppin' Nick exclusive track by our own Young Dylan. Here's Vote, Vote, Vote.
Look, I've been thinking a lot. Thinking about this country, who we are, who we not. All this fighting going on, wonder when will it stop. If my voice was heard, what do I really want? All this talk, Democrat, Republican, it's us, the U.S., it's our government. We get the chance to raise our hands, cause the bottom we fall, and united we stand. So, we got a voice, A, we got a choice, A. Let's get together and make some noise and vote, vote, vote. You know we gotta vote, vote, vote. We got a voice, A, we got a choice, A. Let's get together and make some noise and vote, vote, vote. You know we gotta vote, vote, vote. Look, your mom votes and your dad votes. I know some politicians sad, wish they had votes. I can vote now if I was 18, trying to be patient, but I'm done waiting. I wanna let them know. I wanna put a ballot in the box and cast my vote. I wanna tell them all. Let my voice ring loud so they can hear me in the White House now. Did you know at 35, I can be president of the United States? Oh, you think you're gonna be president? Ha! You could be my vice. We got a voice, A, we got a choice, A. Let's get together and make some noise and vote, vote, vote.